We are absolutely delighted to launch our new series, Queer Leadership 101, Lessons Learned from My Journey as an LGBTQ plus change maker. This is new for 2025, and we're excited to launch these bite-sized 30-minute sessions so that you can meet our fantastic guest speakers, and you'll be meeting Chris shortly, and hearing all about his story as we dive into what makes someone a leader. We'll be looking at themes around inclusion, well-being, and leadership, and hopefully providing you and empowering you with practical takeaways, insights, wisdom, and a lot of core elements of what makes community building such a foundation and solution for what we're seeing around us right now in the workplace and beyond. Chris, welcome to Queer Leadership 101.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for bearing with us with the technical issues.
All right.
Um, Brilliant to see you as always. I'd like to start by asking, who are you? What do you do? How do you show up in the world?
Cool. So I'm Christopher McDonnell. I use he, him pronouns. I'm originally from London, but I've lived in Barcelona for the last 10 years. I celebrated my 10-year anniversary just over a week ago. For my day job, I work as Director of Privacy and Compliance for a global company. And for my gay job, or rather gay jobs, I'm the co-chair of the Global Pride ERG, Employee Resource Group for the parent company of my company. I'm also the chair of the Pride ERG of my company, and I'm very happy to have been a member of the We Create Space Global Advisory Board for the last year or so. And I guess the most important job that I have is that I'm the devoted human to my two beautiful dogs. So that's who
What
I
are
am
their na-
up in the world.
what are their names?
Dobby and Kyle.
Dobby and Kyle, great names. Just a few hats that you're wearing there, Chris. And I imagine that keeps you super busy. I want to start by asking this term around queer leader, right? What makes you a queer leader specifically? And was there a defining moment where you felt comfortable identifying as one?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because I honestly don't spend too much time thinking about being a leader now, but that's definitely not necessarily been or hasn't been the case throughout my life. And I remember as a young manager, in a previous life, I was a nurse for 16 years, and I became a senior nurse manager very quickly. I think I was in my mid-20s, which was quite young to be managing quite a serious service and large teams. And I was, back then I was very focused on trying to become a leader and kind of trying to work out what that meant. And actually, what that meant was I made a lot of mistakes. And I had to learn very quickly, although it wasn't very easy, that there isn't a direct correlation between being a manager and being a leader. The two things are not necessarily synonymous. And so it took a lot of pain to kind of move away from that and to learn to let go. Um, so, as I said, when I was younger, I was more focused on the idea of wanting to be a leader, but I had to learn to let go. And so I think the first time I really realized that I might be a leader, let alone a queer leader, was when I was identified as one, when I was referred to as a leader, and that was through the work that I was doing leading the ERG. And I've got a lot of views around leadership and what makes an effective leader. I think much like the term ally, I think that being a leader is something that you do, not a title that we choose for ourselves. I don't think it's something that we should necessarily covet, but I think it's something that we should aspire to. Um, and I've seen too many people referred to as leaders where I don't actually see the evidence in what they're doing. So I think I'm less focused on the concept of the title and more focused on, am I doing what is what I'm, am I doing the thing that people are calling me?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit like when people use the word icon, and it's like, not so sure, not so sure. Um, what was it like that first moment that you heard yourself described as one?
It was it was a strange moment. I think because and I don't know that the words were necessarily queer leader in that kind of
Mm,
arrangement, but it was through my work with the ERG, and I think it was this kind of full circle moment, really, of I was, as I said, I was a nurse for many years working in the health service in the UK, and so you would think at least that being an openly gay person would be an easy thing to do, but it definitely played a part, or impacted the shame that I carried, and not feeling comfortable to come out and be my true authentic self. And so the very idea that my queerness would be front and center for anything that I do, let alone in terms of leadership and management, was quite an alien concept. So it was this kind of full circle moment of feeling kind of confused by it, but also really proud because it showed some real personal development and kind of my story in development.
And it's how you kind of harness that into your story, really, isn't it? And understanding the impact and the influence that you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm somebody that, I find it very difficult to distinguish between the various parts of my life, work and personal and kind of passion projects, which, my ERG work is both work and passion project. And that's because I try to give everything I have to all of those things, and it sometimes comes at personal cost. Sometimes it makes that ability to distinguish and the ability to kind of give the best of myself to each of those strands difficult. But I think it allows me to bring my authenticity to what I do.
And well, you really do. And within that authenticity, I'd love to ask, what three words would you use to describe your leadership style? And how did you suss out what your style was?
So I'm sure that people that work with me have heard me use these words so many times that they're quite bored of hearing them. But I think transparency. I'm really keen and an advocate for being transparent where it's possible and where you can be. Being accountable. I'm really big on personal accountability, but also ensuring that people around me are demonstrating accountability. And that doesn't mean that we call them out on the lack of accountability, but I try um, to kind of steer people towards the idea that we do have agency, and it's important to maintain accountability. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned, but also, and it's not necessarily a word, but it's more of a concept, and that's being open to being wrong and making mistakes. I think that all too often we look to people in leadership and management positions as the kind of buck stop, which is quite right, but also as the place to get all of the answers and um, to kind of know everything. And I might be the decision maker, I might have significant influence, but I don't know everything. And I make mistakes, and I'm wrong, not just some of the time, but quite a lot of the time. And I think being open to that was definitely a big learning curve for me, which I think partly came through professional and personal development, but also just through maturation through life.
Yeah, there's a real vulnerability to that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think you know I undoubtedly have developed my own style and um, my own kind of brand, if you like, based on what I've seen other people do, both good and bad. And I've always been a massive advocate for learning from good mentors, but good mentors don't have to have done everything right. I think you can learn from people that were bad mentors as well. So there are definitely people that I've been under the leadership of in my life where I promised myself that I would never be that or kind of demonstrate those qualities and behaviors. So yeah, I think vulnerability is something that I've seen, and I try to emulate because I think it just makes me real, and I think that's what people want when forget about the kind of hierarchy or whether we're referring to people as leaders or not. I think we connect best to people when we see that there's vulnerability and authenticity.
I absolutely see that. And letting your guard down. Not everything has to be polished, and being prepared to make those mistakes, publicly make those mistakes, and acknowledge them. And particularly working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? We need to be prepared to change our hearts and change our minds when presented with new information, new lived experience, new ways of being.
Yeah, absolutely. My heart is still being changed regularly.
Yeah.
Maybe not as regularly as it once was when I was younger and when I was coming up in the world, but I'm still very much open to learning new things, unlearning things that I need to unlearn. Um, and I kind of the DE&I work that I do happened almost by accident, but actually it was I don't think it was necessarily an unfortunate accident or an accident that wasn't meant to happen, because I think I've always been an activist in one way or another throughout my life. And so it kind of makes sense that I would be kind of moving into the DEI and queer leadership space to kind of further the cause of something that means so much to me.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to tap into that vulnerability now, if that's okay. Is there a challenge you're currently facing in relation to your own development, and how are you navigating that?
Yeah, so the work that I do leading or co-leading the global Pride ERG for our parent company, um, has only recently come onto my come into my life. So we started, I guess, in December, and I'm working within a team of 4 co-leaders who I've got the greatest amount of respect for, and we get on really well. And there's lots of, we all bring great things to the table. But I'm used to working in very structured environments with hierarchy and with designated roles, and that doesn't exist. And none of us have suggested that we would work towards that, which I think is great. And I haven't, which is also great because there was definitely a version of me not that long ago who would have been pushing to kind of define who we are and what we do so that we can try to bring some structure what we do to what we do. But actually, thinking back to my life as a nurse, I working in chaos was something that happened every single day. And I'm not very good at chaos that I don't feel in control of, but I'm trying to lean into it a bit more. So it's interesting to see kind of lessons that come up throughout life that you think are resolved and then they come up in another way. It's a bit like whack-a-mole, really. You never know when it's going to re-emerge and come up. So I'm kind of working through that again now, because actually living without the structure sometimes allows really great things to happen.
Absolutely. I can be quite tied to my routine, and I don't give myself any flex to grab new opportunities or to bounce around.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm such a creature of habit and routine, partly because it actually allows me to maintain um, a pretty good equilibrium in terms of my personal life, my professional life, but also my health, my mental health, my physical health.
Mm.
But what happens when I become so kind of aligned to and defensive of that is I close myself off to opportunities. So coming into this year, I've tried, and last year was pretty tough for me on a personal level because I had a number of um, so I experienced some issues within my personal life, some bereavement, and so this year I really wanted to kind of make the most of the opportunity of life, and the kind of the experience of that bereavement taught me and I've been around a lot of death in my life, both professionally and personally, but that bereavement particularly taught me the value of life, and the value of making the most of every opportunity. And so I've really tried to open myself up to being less ingrained in that way of thinking. And actually, what that's done is it's allowed me to start on some new great paths. So I've just started. In fact, I'm just about to start a musical theatre course on Monday, which is a big passion of mine. So I love musical theatre. Anyone who knows me will know that I'm obsessed. And so I've started doing singing lessons, and I'm starting a course next week. So yeah, I'm trying to be less married to my routine.
Yeah, it's beautiful and telling in a way that those life experiences, those good mentors, those bad mentors, grief, everything shapes how you show up in the world, but also really influences the way we show up as leaders.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said earlier on, I think it, I respect people, and I can see that there is a way to create boundaries and to disconnect elements of our lives from kind of different strands. But for me, that's just not how I operate. I am, I can be quite an emotional person, and it's hard for me to disconnect my life experiences because they very much inform who I am and how I deal with situations in the moment.
Yeah, it's hard to separate. It's hard to,
Yeah,
to compartmentalize at times. Super exciting about your musical theatre course. Can't wait to see that unfold.
thank you.
I'd love to know, how have you approached asking for help or support or finding a mentor when you've perhaps needed a bit of extra guidance? And what advice would you have around doing this?
Yeah, so I guess I have a natural tendency to be a problem solver. So asking for help doesn't always come very naturally to me.
Okay.
Um, but I've always been comfortable in knowing that when I don't have the answer, or knowing when I need to find somebody who does, or who can help, who can kind of provide a perspective that I can't. So I think I've always looked to mentors, or identify mentors who fill a gap that I don't have. And that's not to say that the things that I do have don't need refining. But I think that certainly when I think about the mentors that I've identified throughout my life, it's always been about kind of what is the gap and what do I aspire to be, and can this person help me to get there? And I find that that's often been best achieved in kind of informal mentorship. Um, sometimes the mentor doesn't even know they're a mentor. But and I guess that's sometimes the trying to work out the distinction between mentor and role model. But yeah, asking for help is not something that I do very well, and it's again, it's a part of my personal learning curve for this year to be more open to asking for help.
What maybe tools or techniques have you lent into to enable yourself to do that? For me personally, it's also something I really, really struggle with. But having experienced burnout, I
Mm,
always go back to I don't want to go back to that place, so just get over it.
yeah, yeah. I think being vocal about when I'm struggling with with the right people. So that's not, I don't think that everyone needs to hear about my struggles, because I think that I don't want to burden other people, and that, I
Mm,
know that's very much a personal trait, but also I think sometimes finding the right audience is important, because also some of that is about influencing and trying to get support from people that actually can um, support the situation. So yeah, for me the a big lesson I learned over the last year was being vulnerable enough to acknowledge when I needed help and to speak about it.
yeah.
And sometimes people don't have the answer. That sometimes the help is just vocalizing what you're
Yes.
experiencing. In fact,
Yeah.
often that is because often the answers are within, actually. Not always, but often. But just getting it out lightens the load so significantly.
Yeah, it was actually John Paul from We Create Space who said, if someone comes to you asking for help, ask them, are you looking for a solution or are you just looking for someone to listen? And that can often be a great response when someone's asking you for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I said, I tend to be a natural problem solver. So there are people in my life who have come to me with problems, and the thing that I have done is just jump into problem solving
Yeah.
mode. And actually, a couple of people have said to me, "I just need you to listen. I don't need
Mm,
you to say or do anything. I just need you to listen." And that has enabled me to go to other people, and sometimes to those same people with the same approach.
yeah. Yeah. I'm the same. I'm a problem solver. I'm a fixer. I'm here with you. What are you most proud of or passionate about with your work?
So I think again, talking like I said earlier about my queerness being kind of front and center of what I do now. I think that the thing that I'm really proud about and passionate about is creating the kind of visibility and advocacy that would have meant the world to me in my own personal and queer development. So I just didn't see myself in the world when I was
Mm,
growing up in the UK in the 80s and the 90s and the noughties. I didn't see myself in the world. I didn't see myself in the media. I didn't see myself in the workplace. I felt really invisible, and I felt like I I wasn't reflected, and that is really complex and multidimensional. But I think um, what I've tried to do through my work as a through the ERGs particularly, but also within all of the businesses that I've worked in, is to create visibility and advocacy, and that's a huge part of any DE diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging program. I think people need to be able to see how they belong
yeah.
in the space that they're occupying.
Absolutely. Tapping into your queerness, actually, we've had a question come through. And the question is, are self-development and self-acceptance crucial steps before or after coming out of the closet?
Good question. I mean, I think it's important to be on the journey of self-acceptance, but I don't. Recently I've faced some kind of very intrinsic questions and things that I'm trying to work through to develop myself personally, and it's made me realize that I'm still very much in that kind of understanding who I am and defining what that means. So I don't think that's a kind of an end point. I think it's a journey. I don't think that you can have that resolved before you come out. I think it's a lifelong journey, and I think we spend our lives coming out in one way or another, whether it's about our queerness
Yeah.
or elements of our queerness or other aspects of our lives. So I think trying to look at it from the perspective of it being a kind of one and done is in some ways hindering our ability to develop.
Yeah, I love that. It's definitely a journey with different peaks and troughs and
Absolutely.
a wild ride sometimes.
100%.
What does giving back to your community look and feel like to you?
I think it feels like being active is, I'm kind of very closely connected to being a problem solver. I like to see action. I often lose interest in things very quickly if I don't feel like they're moving along and that there's things happening. So being active, and I like to be a part of the solution rather than talking about the problem. Feeling like I'm heard, and that's not always about being loudest or putting my view across, but making sure that I'm being heard, I'm being seen, that my visibility is as important as everyone else's, because as much as I'm trying to give other people space, I need some space as well. And listening to what other people say, what my community needs. I've spent much of my life longing for, but having not really found community. And I moved to Barcelona 10 years ago, and We Create Space came into my life a few years ago, literally physically in Barcelona with the presence here. And it really was the first time I felt a part of both a global but a local queer community. So for me, it's really important to be an active member and to give back as much as possible.
Yeah, I think everything you just spoke so much to finding that term, finding your tribe, but finding inclusion and belonging, but also the real importance of co-production and collaboration when it comes to building communities.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've just, yeah, it just would feel really unnatural to me to, and no reflection on other people who may choose to not be as active as I, or as active as others, or not active at all. But it would feel really unnatural for me to not be a part of creating the story and creating the community.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Your story as well, like,
Yeah.
and legacy, and it all comes into it. We asked you to come up with three takeaways under our core pillars of well-being, inclusion, and leadership. And I wonder if we can start with inclusion.
Yeah, so for me, inclusion, it was around transparency and communication. So I think that, as I was saying earlier on, being fully transparent wherever and whenever possible allows people to feel a part of what's going on and to feel as included as possible. And communication goes kind of hand in hand with that. Um, for well-being, I think self-awareness. I think being aware of one's own capabilities, um, our capacity, and the needs of those and others around us is really important. And then for the leadership element, I would say visible role models. So as I was saying before, if seeing yourself, or seeing something that you can connect with in the world. If you can see it, you can be it. And for too long, I didn't think I could be it because I couldn't see it. Paying it forward is really important. I think creating space and bringing others up with you to occupy that space, but also to make more space for others.
Thank you so much for sharing. Those are fantastic. We've got another audience question come in, and the question is, when we lead groups, there is often a risk of becoming an iconic figure, again, as we tapped into earlier, and involuntary imposing views or not offering enough space for feedback because of our leadership or personality. How do you make sure that this does not happen? I mean, that taps into so many different facets around, as you've said, listening, also keeping your ego in check.
Yeah,
Um, what's your thoughts?
yeah. I think doing everything you can to not make it about you, but sometimes not making it about you makes it about you because it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think making sure that you are a part of the conversation, but giving space to other people to lead that conversation. And yeah, I think it's. I mean, I don't know that I have the answer to how you keep it in check, but certainly from my own perspective and what I do, I think I try to make sure that the story isn't about me, but it's about us, and always keep that as the kind of focal point. I think I still feel quite uncomfortable about the term queer leader or leader because again, it's not something that I certainly at this point in my life necessarily cover or desire, and so in kind of doing that, in performing that role, I try to emulate the qualities that I enjoy and respect in other leaders, which is being humble, being creating space, leaving space, acknowledging when people aren't feeling included and trying to bring them in, bring them along that journey.
Yeah, I think there's a real balance because actually you've spoken about the pride that you feel in yourself as well. So yes, there's the humbleness, but there's also being able to tap into that pride and knowing what you're achieving.
Yeah, absolutely. I am. I'm not very good at not because I carry any particular shame or I don't think I'm doing great work, but I'm not very good at celebrating or shouting out about successes and when things are going great and the work that I do and that the some of the groups that I'm involved in do. So I think being unashamedly confident to sing and to celebrate about the stuff that we do is really important. Particularly that there has never been a more important time than right now for us to continue to celebrate and um, to be who we are and to keep that message alive.
Absolutely. And as a leader, it's really important to do that for yourself in terms of your progression because hey, if we can't shout about ourselves, then we're not going to progress. But also the way that you use those opportunities to amplify others as well and bring them along.
Yeah, because it gives permission to other people, right? I think,
Mm,
and sometimes that's the thing that I have to remind myself that it's okay to talk about myself because it permits other people to talk about themselves.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of my final questions for you, and again for our audience are listening, thank you so much for the questions and the comments. And we actually had a great comment from Raven who shared, as a coach, so many times I'm almost not even needed. People just need a safe space to untangle things by themselves.
Yeah, it goes back to that point I made earlier on about kind of going to people with problems and being able to speak about it. I don't, and it's not to say that I have all of the answers all of the time, but quite often I have the answer. It's about having the space and the coaching, whether that's through formal coaching or informal coaching, to bring that out of me and to work through those options.
Yeah. We've got some other great comments coming in. Getting it wrong is a learning opportunity. Cultural intelligence is also important next to transparency and accountability. I love this one. Chaos is creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. And I really try to lean into the chaos, and I've spent much of my life trying to lean into it, but it does scare me a lot as well.
So, well, it's all around us, so we
Yeah.
have to embrace it. My final question for you, Chris, is this. What is the biggest lesson you've learned along the way that you'd like to share as words of encouragement and wisdom for today's attendees, the leaders out there?
I guess it's in summary, it's kind of what I've already said. Be humble, be open to being wrong, be open to not always having the answer, but looking to find it and working with others to find what that answer might be. And always look to bring other people up with you. There's nothing to be celebrated by not creating space for other people because there's plenty of space. And if there isn't, then we'll make more.
Well, we'll create it.
Exactly.
Boom, boom. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for the first installment of Queer Leadership 101. Thank you for all the incredible work you do. We love you being part of our community.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for our audience. Again, apologies for the tech issues at the start. We'll have those nailed down for next time. We would love to work with you. If you would like to bring We Create Space into your organization to support you, get in touch. But for now, thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon. Cheers.